Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another CARS Reading Skills workshop as part of the Jack Weston MCAT podcast. As you may know, in these episodes, we are going to go through one of our Jack Weston daily CARS passages. This one specifically is called Nativity Ode. It's the daily passage from December 24th, Christmas Eve, which is the day that this is posted. If you are not listening to this on December 24th, no problem. You could find the link to this passage in the description of the episode. So essentially, what we're going to do, we'll go through each paragraph sentence by sentence, really talk about what the author is communicating as far as their ideas and what they value. And then how we'll talk about how we're going to track that throughout the passage so that when we get a question, like this particular passage has, that's like, hey, what's the main idea of the passage? We're ready for it. So, I'm excited for this one, Jack. Happy holidays, by the way.
Yes, yes,
Um,
happy holidays.
it'll be fun to do kind of a winter holiday themed passage together.
Yeah, yeah, no, we love this. I love this. I think this is the best time of the year, where everyone can kind of relax and be with family. And why not do a
Absolutely.
passage that's sort of themed around the holidays? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So happy winter holidays, everybody. We hope you enjoy this one. Um, okay, well let's go ahead and hop in. So the first sentence says paintings of the Nativity, the story of the birth of Jesus, sometimes please the beholder because of their familiar and domestic setting. Okay, so we're starting off with our subject, which is nativity paintings. And the argument here is that they're sometimes pleasing because they're familiar and they're domestic. So, okay, they're familiar. This is a story we've heard before. Domestic, probably, family. It's a home setting, right? It's familiar to us, and that is pleasing. That's the argument here.
Right. And we could argue that, hey, just because it's familiar or domestic doesn't necessarily mean it's pleasing, right? But the author's
Totally.
arguing, yes, it pleases people because it's familiar. Maybe it pleases people because it's an older story, or what if it pleases people because it has some other, characteristic like the weather is nicer at that time. Whatever the case may be, the author has made a very distinct point of view, opinion that we need to track here.
Yeah. Yeah, and it might be familiar, but that doesn't necessarily mean
It's
that's
please,
pleasing, right?
right?
Familiar and
Absolutely.
domestic could be really not pleasing. Who knows?
Right.
Um, yeah, this is definitely an argument. So let's see if they support that, if they change that, challenge it in our next sentence. The scenes usually include a barn or a rough shed, a child being gazed upon by inarticulate grown-ups, and animals surprised by the commotion. Okay, so this is just describing what the scene is, right? So what you might see in a painting of the Nativity, it's not inherently saying that this is pleasing or that this is familiar and domestic. It's just explaining, right? So I'm thinking, okay, cool. I can visualize this. I can imagine what this painting of the Nativity might look like. I wouldn't say it's really changing our argument, but it's helping establish it on more firm footing, basically, by helping us visualize and understand what's going on.
Right, right. And I love being able to at least understand what the painting looks like, right? Like they're talking about a painting. Let me at least understand what it is that they're painting, right?
Yeah.
And I recommend if you read art passages, go Google the paintings, right, that they talk about in these passages and see if it really aligns with what you visualized, right? You could definitely do that for so many AMC Cars passages where they talk about art and Cezanne and Picasso. They always bring up some sort of painting that they depicted and you can do that. I think it's fun. But in this case, aren't these things very domestic and familiar sounding, right? Animals surprised by commotion, child being gazed upon, right? These all sound like very domestic things.
Hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, agreed. I agree. And yeah, it's super fun to do that with art passages after the fact, of course, not while you're reading, but it's
Yes,
super
yes.
cool. Yeah, I'm intrigued. And I agree. It sounds pretty cohesive with the argument we got in the first sentence. Okay, our next sentence says they also contain people of many kinds, rich and poor, sophisticated and simple. So it's kind of like varied, right? But it that feels familiar too, right? Like there's so much human beings as a group of individuals are so diverse. There's so many different times of experience, and that's what they're saying here. It's I think it's almost familiar in how diverse it is, right? Many different kinds of people. So sounds good. We're just describing more about the scenes, but I feel like it could tie back to our original argument. And then we see here a painter could find opportunity to engage many kinds of interest and to use all his skill in juxtapositions of color, in painting faces, clothing, and the characteristic stance of different kinds of men. Okay, so again, we're not just focused on nativity, we're focusing on nativity paintings. And it sounds like it's just it's a fun thing to paint, right? There's a lot of different ways to express what's going on. I think the argument that was more prevalent throughout the paragraph was definitely the fact that it's familiar and domestic, and that's pleasing. But again, we I do want to note that we're focused pretty specifically on the paintings of nativity, not just the nativity story or not just the idea of nativity.
Great.
Awesome. Yeah. It's again, it's kind of fun to read something like this around the holidays.
Yeah,
Especially
for
with
sure.
it being visualizable. Okay, let's look at P2. It says often such pictures convey a feeling of geniality, of festivity, in which the symbolism of the occasion is subordinated to the sense of human participation in it. Okay, I feel like the symbolism of subordination part got a little bit less clear, but the beginning was pretty clear. Okay, the pictures convey a feeling of geniality. If that word individually is a little bit harder for you to understand, I think of festivity makes it easier, right? The fact that they're saying a feeling of geniality, of festivity, you could probably
Right.
infer that those two are related in some way,
Yes.
right? They have a lot in common. So if festivity makes sense to you, that's they may not be literally synonyms, but they are closely related based on just the way that the author has brought them up. So some positive, maybe energetic sort of feeling in these pictures, basically.
I don't feel like I understand the latter half of this sentence, but I
Yeah.
do understand the first half. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. You do the best you can with it. But I agree, this sentence started off pretty, common sense, pretty tangible for us, and then it kind of went off the rails a little bit.
Because so I could definitely sense how someone reading this will read this, understand the first half, then get to the second half and then feel like they don't get it, so they have to go back and reread, right? And I think that actually hurts you more than helps you. As long as you read slowly and you understand that not every sentence is necessarily going to be extremely important. That as long as you get some sense of what's going on and you don't deviate, you don't change the message that the author is providing, you're going to be fine. The problem usually that students face when it comes around comprehension is they inject their own assumptions or ideas or guess what the author is trying to say. Don't guess, right? Stick to exactly what's being said. So the only thing I really understand is these kinds of paintings or pictures usually not only convey this pleasing, atmosphere because of the familiar, but it's also very festive, right? Celebratory. So that's it. That's all I have so far. The other stuff mentioned subordinated to the sense of human participation. I have no clue what's being said there, but that's okay. I don't have to panic and reread to try to get it because at the end of the day, the MCAT's only going to test you on like 15 to 20% of the passage that everyone can understand, right? So stick to that. Okay, great.
That's such important advice, you guys. I love that so much. We're not trained to do that in science. We're trained to do the opposite. So very, very important. I'm glad you pointed that out. Okay, so we have this feeling of geniality or of festivity in these paintings. That, I think, is the impact of the adoration of the Magi as Jan Bruegel, the elder, conceived it, with an animated and even humorous treatment of detail. Okay, so we're giving a very specific, probably painting of the Adoration of the Magi, um, according to Jan Bruegel, the elder. So this is a specific, probably painting based on the context that embodied this geniality and festivity, something that's worth tracking, right? In our courses, we talk about specific types of support. This feels like an example, right? According to the language that we use. But we also get I think. So it's also the author saying, "Hey, I believe that this painting illustrates the thing I just said." So it's a pretty important sentence. It's not an argument, but it's providing a decent amount of support for that idea of the geniality and festivity of these paintings.
Right.
So pretty impact dense actually in that one.
Right. Anytime you see the word I, especially if it's coming from the author, I think, that means the author is sort of, kind of giving us their own opinion. Right. Now, you may assume that if they write something, it's their opinion. That's not always the case. Usually, they'll write something, an argument, and tie it to someone else's opinion or someone else's point of view. This makes it very clear that it is, in fact, the author's point. Right. So I would definitely keep track of this idea that these pictures are usually going to convey feelings of festivity, of celebration. Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, another example is Gentile da Fabriano's more formal, more ornate, but equally crowded and humanly active presentation of the same subject. All right, this one made less sense to me. We've got another individual who it sounds like is doing the same thing, but in a slightly more formal way. Great. So again, the author really cares about this point about geniality and festivity. I don't know that that's going to be a main idea, okay? But we definitely have some specific support types here. I just want to make sure that I know that these nativity paintings are festive or they carry this feeling of festivity. I think from that, Jack, it seems like we'd be fine,
Yes, as
right?
long as you know that it's also supported by the author, right? And
And the
because we want
example.
to, and an example, yeah, the Adoration of the Magi is an example of a painting done by Bruegel the Elder, who's a popular painter back in the day, um, who, basically depicted it in that way, right? So
Mhm.
that's an example of someone, oh, look, they made it all festive, right? Such paintings were festive in that time. So okay, cool. That's it, really. Two ideas so far. First idea, paragraph one, this idea that these paintings of nativity are pleasant because they're familiar. And the second idea here is they usually make you feel festive, make you feel,
Yes.
happy and joyful. Okay.
Excellent. Okay. P3 says, in contrast, already, Jack, I feel like my ears are perked up. I'm like, huh?
Right,
Okay.
right.
This is going to be different. So, in contrast, John Milton's ode, quote, on the morning of Christ's nativity, has the great achievement of reducing to a minimum the background of the scene in the manger and the birth of the child in order to bring to life quite different aspects of the event. Okay, so we're directly stating in contrast. I'm thinking whatever is about to come after this is going to be probably pretty different from what we had said before. So we were talking about geniality and festivity in P2. In contrast, Milton's is probably not as genial or festive, right? It's reducing things to a minimum. I feel like this sentence I'm trying to visualize and it's hard without a little more detail, but it's very clear that this is doing something very different. Okay, we're focusing on different parts of the nativity than we had in the other paragraphs. So I'm primed now to focus on or I'm honed in to try and figure out in what specific ways is Milton's different. What is Milton doing that the others aren't?
Exactly.
So
We don't know
I'm
yet. Yeah,
excited.
yeah, we're not sure, and it's not clear, and that's okay. We got to keep reading to figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think as long as you can get Milton does something a little different, I think you're fine.
Right.
Okay, Milton's poem strikes us as instantly as uncluttered. Okay, that I think is more direct. It's interesting we've switched from paintings to poems, right? Milton's poem strikes us as uncluttered. But okay, uncluttered. how is that different, right? Before it was genial, it was festive. It sounds like the author feels uncluttered is pretty different. Again, we had reduced things to a minimum. Seems like toned down a little bit. That
It's
I think is a
interesting.
more
Yeah.
direct.
It's interesting how you were kind of figuring out whether or not there is like a dichotomy, right? Usually if they say, oh, it's all familiar, it's all pleasant because it's familiar, sometimes you would expect the author to actually debate this by saying, well, maybe it's pleasant because it's uncluttered or something. But it's we're talking about something totally different now. We're talking about poems and how they're just uncluttered. And I don't understand what the definition of uncluttered is here. Is that just more organized? Is it just more clean? Like what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't have this kind of like adjacent idea that kind of contradicts or goes against the previous idea. Sometimes you just have a random idea in a paragraph, and that's okay, right? But let's see how this relates to what we've already read. We're not sure yet, but don't be alarmed if that ever happens, right? Things can be randomly brought up by the author because, again, this is a conversational styled piece of work, right? Where the author is just talking to us. And usually, if you've spoken to someone, right, they go off tangents. And this is maybe the author going off a tangent here. We'll see how it connects, though.
Yeah, let's check it out. He is interested in presenting to us a movement in time with a full sense of its immediate novelty and the direction of its future influence. All right, so I I don't think that made sense. I think the most tangible thing was the sentence that came before, that Milton's poem is uncluttered, and that makes it different. Again, I think parts of the first sentence were a little helpful, talking about like reducing or focusing on different aspects of the event or like minimizing kind of noise or like distractions in the background. But I mean, I think we just stick with it's different because it's uncluttered. I think that's the most clear thing. We know that
That's
this
it.
is specifically Milton's poem.
Right. That's it. Nothing else here.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at P4. The structure of Milton's Nativity Ode may be looked upon from one point of view as an exploration of the contrast between deceit and truth. Huh? Deceit, like a lie. So we're exploring the contrast between truth and lies in this poem according to
This
its
is
structure.
This
This is
is where,
hard.
yeah, this is where most students will just give up, right? And that's normal because I'm getting lost. Like, what's happening here? Why are we talking about a poem and what are we talking about with this whole deceit and truth? Don't give up. Don't just keep going until it clears up. This is how Cars passages are. Honestly, you could boil down a Cars passage to like 4 or 5 sentences. But
Yeah.
the hard part is finding those 4 or 5 sentences, right? That make a meaningful difference in how the author is talking about this subject. So we need to find them. This is not easy, this is not clear. I always think of things in terms of the common person. Would the average common person that graduated high school understand this sentence? Probably not, right? This is very complicated, this is very deep and dense and also esoteric, meaning you probably need to have some background in the subject to really understand what's going on, and you're not supposed to. So if that's the case, don't ignore it, but at the same time, don't panic if you don't feel like you understand it fully.
Yes, absolutely. And so often we have trap answers that have scary words from sentences like that.
Yes,
Don't
exactly.
fall for it. Don't fall for it. Um, okay, the descent of persuasive and decisive peace, which is capitalized, by the way, for anyone just listening, provides for the reader an introduction to the experience of a rapt enchantment, the intoxicating image of a world prosperous and without conflict. Okay, I still feel like this is pretty difficult to understand. We're talking about peace, and peace is capitalized. Anytime I see something capitalized or italicized or put in quotes when I'm not expecting it, I want to understand what it means. But honestly, I feel like this sentence is pretty difficult. I don't think most people would be able to understand this. There's
Even more
something
difficult.
intoxicating about it, and that's about it.
Yeah.
It's enchanting, intoxicating. That's
Yeah.
it.
I would continue. This is all super complicated, difficult, kind of taking us into a rabbit hole we can't get out of. So I would just keep going. Yeah.
Awesome. Yet, this preparatory enchantment is incomplete, almost to the point of a lie, because it describes what has not yet come to pass and might not. Okay, this feels like a dot, dot, dot in my brain. And again, my ears are perking up because of the yet, but I still don't fully understand what's going on. It sounds like it was enchanting, it was intoxicating, but whatever was enchanting and intoxicating hasn't happened. I
Yeah.
don't know though. I don't
To the
know.
to the point of a lie. So maybe that's the deceit part, right? Like
Yeah.
it may look like a lie. Again, it's not clear. Like it's tr I guess I'm trying to piece it all together, but it's I'm not doing a great job. I don't see, like when you do a puzzle, usually you kind of see you start seeing a face or something. I
Yeah.
don't see a face. I'm just trying to put things together, piece it all together, but it's not coming together, and that's okay. Keep going because
Mhm.
eventually it will.
Yeah. Okay. Nevertheless, Milton's world before the announcement of Christ's birth is nearly silent, as if it leads us to expect the miraculous event. Okay, I feel like this sentence, I don't really think it's got a concrete argument, but I read this and I'm like, oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, author. Like, I feel like we're back to Milton, which is nice. And we're back to the nativity scene, which is nice. It just feels a lot more concrete. Like, we're back to kind of what we were
Yeah.
talking about in the other paragraphs, a lot more grounded. So it's quiet. It's quiet. And that leads us to expect the miraculous event. Again, I don't know if that's really the argument we want to focus on, but it feels like we're coming back to what the
Yeah,
actual
at
topic of this
least
passage was.
at least we can understand it, and right, and it kind of goes
Yeah.
back to what we've been talking about, and it's not an argument, it's just kind of describing it, right? Like it's nearly silent, as if it's describing the poem, right? Or his work. Okay, so let's keep going and see if this finishes off with something important.
His poem is great because it's so focused on depicting quietness. Okay, so here, poem is great. That's an argument. Great. But also because it's great because it's focused on quietness. And they had mentioned silence before. They had mentioned that there's this like enchanting quality of it. Like it seems like the author feels that, again, this is great because it's focused on quiet. And to me, I'm remembering that this whole context with Milton was brought up as a contrast to what we had said in P1, P2. And it's genial and it's festive. It sounds almost like, especially in P1, it sounds like pretty, almost like distracting. Like there's a lot going on. This is very still. It's very quiet. It's silent. That makes sense to me now. It kind of clicks of like, oh yeah, this is pretty different from what we talked about before. I wouldn't visualize the nativity scene that we had described previously as quiet or silent or any of that. So I think this last sentence is way more clear. It is an argument. Poem is great because it's focused on quietness or silence.
That's it. That's on. I wish they didn't make us go through this roller coaster of a paragraph to get to this last sentence. But if you've been following us since, September or even August, you know that this is a very common theme in MCAT cars, where they'll talk and talk and talk in a paragraph, and then the very end of the paragraph, they clear it up. That's not always the case. Sometimes it happens in the middle of a paragraph, sometimes it's at the beginning of a paragraph. But don't lose faith or hope. Keep going until it really is clear. And here, finally, it gave us clarity, right? This is what the author really wants us to know. It's an opinion because we don't know if his poem is great. We don't even know if his poem is great because it's focused on depicting quietness. Maybe it's great because of the number of words it used. Maybe it's great for another reason. Maybe it's not great. So this is a very distinct argument that is non-factual. It can never be measured, right? And that's what makes an opinion opinion. It's something that we base off our experience, based on our own judgment. And so this is a judgment call by the author that we need to track because the questions are going to be surrounding these kinds of ideas.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that was our idea from P4. That's kind of tying everything together so far. Let's check out P5. We've got 7 total paragraphs for this passage. So, a calm silences even the ocean, as we are told of the legendary time close to Christmas when, quote, birds of calm sit brooding on the charmed wave, end quote. A bit of lore that only literary tradition and the incantatory sound of the verse make us accept. Okay, I feel like this is it's understandable but kind of confusing. We're getting a specific quote, presumably from Milton's poem, and what I'm pulling out of this is calm, silence is the ocean, and they're sitting there brooding. Like this sounds like his poem great is great because it's depicting quietness. Like it sounds like the last
Yeah.
sentence.
Sort of like an
It's
example, right? It's
yeah,
like it's exemplifying, it's showing, illustrating how it's calm. I'm glad because I had no idea how you can make a poem, calm, right? At least and like this is showing us the quietness. Great.
yes. Okay, for otherwise, how could we be convinced by scholars who tell us that the birds of calm were kingfishers, restless and rattling as we know them, disturbed on any pond? Okay, so it sounds like kingfishers, the birds of calm, so to speak, are maybe not so calm. So this is really just a sentence that's helping us understand, hey, yeah, the poem's focused on silence and calm. That's pretty much it. It sounds like the birds of calm or the kingfishers are being used as an example here, but what I'm getting is maybe these types of birds are maybe not always calm, and so therefore it must have been intentional. That's kind of what I'm getting.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Usually it's not, and here is, the greatness of Milton who made it seem like they are calm. Right. Great.
Yes, exactly. All right, let's look at P6.
And so
This,
one thing before we move on,
yeah.
is there something new here? Is that
Um,
just the same as the previous paragraph?
Yeah, I'd say it's the same. I mean, we're getting very specifically the birds of calm. It feels like an example, but I'd say the argument is the same. It's focused on depicting that stillness, that quiet, that silence. I don't think that there's really an argument in that fifth paragraph, and there's so many little hints that we're relating it back to P4 that I'm going to just say this is the same argument that came before, but we did add the example.
Yeah. And what we've learned, and if you're in a program, you know this really well, that if an argument repeats and is supported in more than one paragraph, it is part of our main idea. We have finally found the main idea, right? The first argument in the first paragraph isn't really repeating. Second argument in the second paragraph isn't really repeating. Third paragraph, not so much. Fourth paragraph, right? We start seeing an argument that finally makes sense to us at the end. And then the fifth paragraph just expands on it. To me, if I had to choose what is the main argument so far, I would say it's this idea because it's been discussed in more than one paragraph.
Yeah. And especially if we think of like, I mean, the main idea typically has 2 components. It's like the subject and then what the author wants you to know about the subject.
Right.
I think students sometimes get stuck with, let's say, a main idea type question, like what was the author's main point of a passage like this, because they want to create something or pick something that includes every paragraph. But in this case, I don't think that the subject of our main idea is just like nativity scenes. Like we are very focused on Milton, right? Like most of our passage so far has been about how Milton is doing something different from other types of nativity scenes or odes or whatever, right? Like P1, P2 were pretty general and broad, and then we just got 3 paragraphs in a row that are very focused on Milton's poem. So I think it's a good point to reflect. We don't just want something that addresses every paragraph. We want something that addresses the author's most important arguments. It doesn't have to be all encompassing, but it should be something that repeats. So I think that's really important. I bet if I were to make a bet or a guess, we're probably going to keep focusing on Milton for the rest.
Right.
But we'll have to find out. Okay, let's look. This is piece 6. Um, this stretch of the poem produces a finely controlled crescendo of quiet events, even as it reduces and unclutters the scene and our attention until, and this is another quote, the stars with deep amaze stand fixed in steadfast gaze, end quote. So here, I mean, we've got another quote from the poem. We're pretty focused on the poem again, continuing that same attention and focus. But notice the language here. Quiet events. We're reducing and uncluttering the scene in our attention. It's it's very still it's still aligned with the most recent idea about depicting quietness and silence and stillness. And now it's just the stars are doing this too. So we've got even more quotes that are supporting that more general argument. All right, the still stars and the subsequent staying of the sun beyond the time of its usual rising compels in the beholder an economy of observation. Mm. Okay, well we're saying the still stars and the staying of the sun. That sounds like stillness. That sounds like quiet. I think it's close enough that I'm going to say it aligns, but I feel like this one is a little bit more confusing. Economy of observation. I'm going to keep reading. It seems like we've already anchored ourselves to our P4 idea in this paragraph. So I'm going to keep reading until I see something different. We can perhaps compare it to the heightening of perception one discovers in watching an eclipse. Okay. Again, it seems like we're still going on in the same direction that these poems are, or this poem by Milton is great because it's focused on quietness and stillness and silence. And now we're just talking about the stars or the sky. So that's all I would track. Still P4, and maybe because we've got another particular quote from the past or the poem itself, maybe something about the stars or the sky, just to give me a an idea of what I read if I look down at my map. Anything else you're seeing from this, Jack?
No, that's it. I mean, this is just more of an example of what we've been reading, right? An example of this poem. And it's so interesting how we went from talking about a painting, right, of nativity to poems of nativity. And that's okay, right? That can happen. That transition can happen. And in this case, it's about Milton. I thought it was going to be different. I thought it was going to be about maybe someone else, but at least now we know the author really cares about Milton and it really cares about this poem and how they feel about this poem, which is that it depicts quietness. So we've gotten two different examples. One, one is in the previous paragraph, this birds of calm. Second one is this stars with deep amaze, right? Which again kind of shows us quietness. I'm happy. I feel like we found the main idea, right? It's
Yeah.
been established pretty clearly now.
Yes. Yeah. And it's got our main subject, and it's an idea that's come up now in 3 paragraphs. And even they brought up in here, like it reduces and unclutters the scene. We brought up uncluttered in even paragraph 3. So even earlier than what we call our main idea. We didn't really know what uncluttered meant. But when we're tying this paragraph to the main idea in P4 of silence and stillness, they're saying, hey, this is uncluttering the scene and our attention. It probably means silence too. Like that idea of uncluttered is probably also contributing to the main idea based on them bringing that word up again in tying with this. So I feel like now we kind of understand what that meant, which is kind of fun. You don't have to go and reverse engineer it, but I think it's interesting to see uncluttered pop up again now in tie with silence and quietness and stillness. It seems like we may have been supporting this idea in even more paragraphs without even realizing it, which is kind of
Right,
cool.
right.
Okay, final paragraph of our passage. But interest in any scene would soon be lessened if there were no human witnesses, as figures in a landscape, themselves negligible, are often needed to make the terrain more real. Huh. Okay. Jack, do you have the sense that we're still going on in the same direction?
I mean I saw a contrast word, so my ears popped up like a dog's would, right?
Hmm.
So I don't know. This sounds a little different to me, but what do you think?
I mean, we're focused now on human witnesses. We're not just talking about, oh, it's calm, like the sky is calm, the birds are calm. This we're saying very directly in the first little fragment here, interest in any scene, well, but as you pointed out, but interest in any scene would be or would soon be lessened if there were no human witnesses. Any scene is also kind of a strong way to phrase that. Right. And we're
And then
saying that the figures are needed to make it more real. So I now we're focusing on humans and figures in a landscape being needed for interest. That is pretty different from just, hey, it's still. I would call that new.
I would say this is definitely a new idea, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't say it necessarily goes against what we've been saying. I think it's just the author is including the contrast word to switch the gear into this new discussion, right? Which is
Hmm.
that poems need human witnesses to be interesting. I think that's what they're trying to say in that sentence. Pretty hard to read, but at least right before the colon or the M dash, it's pretty clear here what it's saying, right? It's saying that it would not be interesting if there were no humans. So that's another way of saying that, right? To remove the double negative, that you need humans to be interesting, right? Or you need human witnesses for it to be interesting. So okay, I guess we're talking about something different around the poem now, right? We're not
Yeah.
talking about calmness. We're talking about interest and what you need to be interesting, right? I guess witnesses.
Yeah. And that's a great point. It's not going against it. It's almost like a, but wait, there's more. Like,
Right.
hold
Right.
on, we're not totally done talking about this yet. It's not negating what we had said previously. Okay, and thus Milton gives us the shepherds. Okay, so we've got people. Sounds good. There's people to address this need for human witnesses. No matter how many poets had put shepherds into a pastoral scene, few could, as Milton does, allow them to be present without trimmings, on the job, naturally seeing what was there, but not saying anything. Okay. It sounds like we're talking more about the quietness, right? It doesn't sound like, again, here especially, I don't think having shepherds is contradicting the focus on silence. It almost sounds like the shepherds are helping us, reinforce the silence idea. So okay, we needed human witnesses. We got them, but that doesn't disrupt the silence as the author is saying. And the last sentence here in our passage says, their silence is a deeper wonder than the first silence. Okay, first silence, is that the sky and the nature? I don't know about that. That seems like a kind of an abstract way to end the passage, but I feel like we understood what was going on in this paragraph, at least at a high level, right? You need the human or you need humans to make landscapes interesting. And I would say the shepherds kind of serve as an example of that. And I say we just call it done there. Jack, what
Right.
do you think?
That's it. I mean, don't be alarmed if the last paragraph ends with a whole new argument, right? Or summarizes what we've already said, or just stops, right? Just keeps going on the same argument, but just stops, right? In this
Yeah.
case, we had, this case of a new argument, different. And that's okay. Like if they ask a question about it, we know it's in the seventh paragraph. Right. And then also the idea in paragraph three seemed a little weird too, right? Milton's poem different because it is uncluttered. I doubt they're going to ask questions about unclutteredness from paragraph three because that paragraph seemed to be a more an introductory paragraph to describe Milton's poem in more detail in the fourth and fifth paragraph and sixth paragraph. So most
Yeah.
likely, I don't think uncluttered is really an idea that they're going to really pound, really hone in on. I think they're going to really hone in on the last paragraph, if anything, as a separate argument, and then of
Yeah.
course the main argument, right? The main
Yeah.
argument super super important, and maybe the first paragraph and second paragraph where they talk about the paintings being, pleasing and because of familiarity or feelings of festivity. Maybe they'll bring up questions around that, but if I had to guess, most questions will revolve around the main idea and this last paragraph, which seems to be a very distinct argument right? That you need witnesses for it to be interesting.
Yes. So in case we missed it, the main idea, how would you phrase it? What would you say is the most important idea to pull from this passage?
The main idea is never going to be a summary. Like it's not like some new argument that we come up with in our head. It's always an argument the author presented and really expanded on. And the only argument that the author really presented and expanded on was really the last sentence of paragraph 4. That his poem is great because it is so focused on depicting quietness. Because that was brought up again with an example in paragraph 5 and 6. And so that's really the argument. If you look at our, daily passage main idea, you'll see it's literally that. It says Milton's poem great because it focuses on silence. If you know that, you're going to be fine. And of course, you should know the examples and where they are located because they could ask questions about that. But that still stems from the main idea.
Yes, absolutely. Well, awesome. This was a fun passage. It's technically holiday related, but it actually ended up being so much about poetry and silence, etc. Like it's not exclusively holiday, which is kind of fun. But hopefully this episode puts everyone in a festive mood, or maybe a silent mood and a quiet mood. Probably everyone's going to fit either into our feelings associated with the paintings of Nativity, or maybe the feelings associated with Milton's poem. It's kind of a
Right.
nice little prelude into the holiday
Or
season.
familiar and
Um,
domestic, familiar and domestic setting, maybe. But
yes. Yeah, it captures the diversity of the winter holiday experience pretty well, right? These are a very different time for everybody. So, from all of us here at the Jack Weston team, we hope you have a wonderful winter holiday, whatever and however you celebrate. And hopefully you get a little bit of rest in this time. A little rest to reflect on why you're doing this is very important. So, happy holidays. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening or whenever we're catching you, and happy studying and happy holidays. Bye, everyone.